Now, when do you post these?
About 2 weeks out.
About 2 weeks out.
Sometime a week, just depends on if somebody has a cold, take a vacation or something like that. Did you got 4th of July plans? You're like me, you just work.
Yeah, just work. And my mom passed away the week before the world shut down last week and last year. And so my 88-year-old dad's by himself for the first time in 64 years. So I've been pretty much spending one or at least a day every weekend with him.
What did she die of?
She had breast cancer and a double mastectomy at the age of 72, and it just ravaged her body, and she put up a fight for 11 years before she gave in. Yeah, she was in hospice care for about 3 years, and my dad was her caregiver. He had help coming in, but stayed by her side for 3 years.
Now, are you from Ware Valley?
Yeah, Maryville's where I grew up.
I had some friends from Maryville, Kevin and David White. I'm sure you didn't know them. But
David White? No, I know of a David White, but yeah. I went to Everett High School and Heritage. I'm not part of the Maryville High School.
I think he went to Heritage.
Did he? Okay.
Yeah, David White. They lived on. You just go down 411, and they're right there on. They were in Greenback.
Greenback. Okay.
How far were you from Greenback?
I was on the east side of town. I was close to the airport. Eagleton Village area is where I grew up.
So you were born and raised in Maryville, Tennessee.
In Maryville, Tennessee, and went to Maryville College, and then went to graduate school at UT Knoxville. And
what did you like school?
Yeah, I didn't try hard in high school. I just kind of glided through and ended up through a 76 out of a class of 376, and
that's not bad, is it?
I woke up the day after graduation. I don't think so. Woke up the day after graduation and went into the kitchen, and Dad always had a calendar there, and he had 14 boxes on the calendar. And I asked him at breakfast, I go, well, Dad, what's those boxes for? And he goes, that's when you're going to tell me where you're moving to or where you're going to college.
Was he serious?
Yeah. My dad was a command sergeant major in the Army, so in the Army Reserve most of his career. But he was used to giving orders and people following them. So.
Was he regimented?
Oh, yeah. I lived a very structured life, kept a military grade haircut until my mom, the hairdresser, curled my hair in 1976, gave me a perm, and I was able to grow it out after that.
There was a period where men got
perms.
Perms.
Yeah.
What was that from? What started that?
I have no idea, but my mom worked in a beauty shop, and she had more male clients than female clients, and it was mostly doing perms, high and tight.
I don't know what started that.
I don't either.
My cousin got one of those.
It's a different look. Most people would look at me today and
I'm
not
sure it
be
was
able to
a
imagine.
TV show or a singer or an actor or something that started that.
Probably so. I don't really remember, but yeah, I had the perms. That may be why I don't have any hair on top today too. So.
Do you think hairstyles, trends like that go throughout, even in business or whatever? You know, the different, like back in '76 there were, what they call them? They called them something. It wasn't a perm, but it was something. But it was a.
Yeah, they had layered looks and all that stuff, and then of course you got into the later generations, got into the rat tails, and
I had a rat tail.
My
dad. The mullet. When was the mullet in?
I think the mullet was 80s or a 90s item, so somewhere.
No, that was Billy Ray Cyrus.
Yeah, that would have
That
been
would
the
have been
80s.
like 82 or something.
Yeah. I was chasing bluegrass concerts at the time. I wasn't too interested in Billy Ray Cyrus.
I've sort of got a mullet now.
Yeah.
You were chasing what?
I was chasing bluegrass festivals at the time, so I was.
That was Who was that guy that did the bluegrass?
Bill Monroe was the one who really, I guess, made the genre mainstream, and Ricky Skaggs brought it back.
Yeah, he brought
Ricky
it back.
Skaggs kind of brought it back. Him and Kentucky Thunder, who I've seen, and
What about
Alison Krauss.
Alison Krauss. She was really beyond. She was almost into pop rock. Some of her songs where they were faster beat.
Now it's considered Americana music.
Americana, yeah.
But Merle Watson, Doc and Merle Watson, traditional guitar pickers and folks were who I like to listen to.
What about
Gib Tanner and the Skillet Lickers from the 30s, stuff like that.
What about the what was I going to say? The Beverly Hillbillies, those guys that played at the intro song.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
And they actually played in some of the episodes.
Mm-hmm.
What was that, Gwen?
Flat and Scruggs.
Flat and Scruggs. Yeah.
Earl Scruggs and Lester Flatt.
Yeah, Earl Scruggs and Lester Flatt. No, Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs. Yeah.
I saw those guys before. And yeah,
They were real bluegrass, right?
Mm-hmm. True bluegrass.
Did you watch Hee Haw?
Of course. Grew up watching Hee Haw, and
Why did they always come out of the corn? What was the idea of that?
playing to the urbanites, I guess, just perpetuating the myth of the country people. But it was just a crazy show. But
How many seasons did that go?
I don't know. Probably
I mean, it wasn't
10
really
or, 10 or 15. It was on a while.
It was like a musical with comedy.
It's an hour-long variety show, yeah.
Variety show, yeah, that's what it was. It was like your pre-Saturday Night Live sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
In fact, it was the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm.
They had singers.
Yeah, I grew up on that and Laugh In and all those shows.
I don't remember Laugh In.
You don't remember
Who was
Laugh
that?
In? Oh gosh, I can't remember all the people that were on it.
Hollywood
anymore.
Squares.
Hollywood Squares, all those were the programs of my era.
Yeah.
Growing up in the 60s and 70s.
How old were you in '61?
1 year old. I was born in 1960.
Tricked you into telling your age, didn't it?
Oh, I'm not afraid of my age. I'm old. I'm 61 and proud to have survived this
You don't
long.
look 61.
It runs in the family. I can thank both my mom and my dad. They seem to look young. My mother never looked her
You'd
age.
pass for my age.
How old are you?
I'm in my.
Go ahead and fess up.
I'm 55.
55?
55.
Enjoy it.
Boy, it goes by quick, doesn't it?
It does, and it goes faster and faster. I'm finally beginning to understand what we used to think about older people. I talk more about what's ailing me than I do about other things. You talk about your doctor visits now. And
What ails you?
What ails me? I was born with a hereditary form of arthritis, known as ankylosing spondylitis.
When did you get diagnosed with that?
I was 20 when I was properly diagnosed, but when I was
How did that feel?
I was in college.
I mean, did it depress you?
No, I was young enough to just move on and try to beat it, but it has its ups and downs. I mean, I have achy joints and a replaced right hip and a left hip that'll be changed out before the year's out, and all kinds of fused necks. So, but
so that's genetic? Or?
It's genetic. It's a form of arthritis that's been tied specifically to a gene, and I've actually traced it into my mother's family because my grandmother handed me a copy of a Progressive Farmer magazine, which was the Farm Bureau magazine back in the 30s, and on the cover was my great-grandfather, Swabe, and he was a fiddle player. Swabe, out of Monroe County, Vonore. And he was a fiddle player in a band, and the cover was called Monroe County Hoedown, and it was a square dance, and he was on the stage playing a fiddle and was all stooped over looking down at the ground. And if you've seen people that are bent over double, chances are this is the disease they have. So,
how many does that afflict?
You know, I don't really know. It's a relatively small percentage. It tends to carry through, women carry it and pass it on, and men tend to contract it. My younger brother, who's 4 years younger than I, came down with it also, and he passed away 16 years ago from complications, so at the age of 44. So he's, yeah, he was the athlete of the family and the invincible one in his mind, and ignored early treatment. As soon as when I was in college, I was a slow reader, so I had to spend a lot of time looking down in a book when I was in school, and woke up one morning with a crick in my neck, and it just never went away. And after going to chiropractors and every doctor I could think of, I was finally referred to a rheumatologist who basically put me in the hospital and did genetic testing to identify it. But my first bout was when I was 8 years old. I jumped out of a swing, how you know how kids swing and jump.
Yeah.
And hit the ground and twisted my ankle apparently, and just watched that thing swell up like a softball, and it just never really got better for a long time. And they took me in, saw the rheumatologist at the time in Knoxville, and they diagnosed it as juvenile rheumatoid and then sent me home. And really didn't have any treatment of any kind until I got into college and got it properly diagnosed. But
is there treatment for it?
Well, yeah, I've Enbrel. I use injectable drug that has been the lifesaver for me, actually. I've been on it for 15 years, and it's kind of stopped the progression of the disease. And my brother's body, his rib cage and diaphragm, his rib cage fused, which made it hard for him to breathe, and then that made his diaphragm function improperly, and he literally died of congestive heart and lung failure from not being able to take in enough breath and expand his chest. So, enough of that stuff though.
Does that, is that nothing, diet doesn't help that at all?
No, I try to pay attention to the diet, but I'm a Southern boy, so I like my country ham and bacon and all those things, which my doctor reminded me this week I need to cut back on.
They say that eating beef really helps arthritis.
Well, that's good. I love my beef, so that's one of the things that I can't give up is red meat. But try to, eat a stable diet and a balanced diet is the main thing. And my wife's very good at that. She's always after me about not taking in enough vegetables or fruits and things like that. But I think diet and, just how you choose to live your life and get your rest, and exercise is important. I stayed active, and, I paddled boats and hiked and backpacked really up until now. The last couple of years have not been good for that because of my deteriorating hip, but
what do you mean paddle boats?
Kayaks. I'm a flat water paddler. My wife and I are. And did
Is that what they call sculling?
No, just recreational kayaks. Just going out and cruising and enjoying the scenery, floating slower rivers or bigger rivers.
Is that what they call fun yak?
No, fun yaks I think are blow up machines
Yeah.
or kayaks that you use, like on the Hiwassee River. No, these are plastic boats or fiberglass boats.
But they're not like they're not a real kayak.
They're real kayaks, but they're not short boats for whitewater
Do they have
rivers.
the plastic, the rubber thing around them?
The skirt?
Yeah.
You have them if you're out on the coast, in the ocean you need them, but generally speaking you don't use them when you're just out paddling away.
What's the skirt for?
Keep the water off of you and out of you.
And
in case you roll, for the whitewater enthusiast, Tim Henderson, by the way, at Cleveland Utilities, is a big whitewater enthusiast, so he'd be a good person to interview.
Can they go around?
Yeah.
What do they do? What's the point of going around?
That's just to upright yourself if you get turned over riding a
So they do
riding
that
a channel.
to practice?
Yeah, they practice that and learn to do that just so they can stay in the boat and keep going down the river. Worst thing you want to do is come out of your boat when you're going down a whitewater river.
Yeah.
So I never was able to do that, by the way. I couldn't roll, probably because of my limited spinal movement. But,
So you just do it for recreation?
Yeah, just for recreation. And I had some friends, when I worked in Loudoun County in economic development, got to know the founders of Dagger Canoes and Kayaks. They lived in Loudoun, and the president of Wilderness Systems, who made accessories, and my good friend there, Robert Harrison, he was the first person to do Section 4 of the Chattooga River, which was where Deliverance, the movie, was filmed.
Which had bluegrass in it also.
Yeah, it did. Took a while to overcome that image of bluegrass. Yeah. But Robert was he was a world-class canoeist, and actually was one of the first, I guess, guides on the Chattooga. Had a guide company. Became a professional photographer. As he said, you learn pretty quickly. It's the pictures you sell to people of them coming down the river that actually make your money. And so he knew all the players in the industry, and they all ended up living, Dagger boats were made up in Harriman and Rockwood area for years. So they're now made over in North Carolina as corporate consolidations have absorbed the companies. But those guys, Robert did all the cataloging for those two companies for their annual sales catalogs. So he invited me to go along one time. I didn't know really anything about boating or anything, paddling a kayak, and asked me if I'd go with him on a trip to the coast to shoot images for the catalogs. And I said, sure. And so I did my modeling, and mostly pictures of my back going away, and in a new boat or a new paddle jacket or spray skirt or something like that. So that's how I got started.
Would you say that's your hobby?
Yeah, it's one of my hobbies. I'm a hiker and a camper and a backpacker. And
you ever go with Joe Kate?
No, I haven't. I haven't hiked with any of the people here in town. I've been pretty busy since I got here, and don't do it as much as I used to.
What did you do in Loudon? That's just right up the road, right?
Mm-hmm. About 50 miles up the road. Same job I do here.
Did you get that job out of high school or out of college?
No, actually I started, when I finished up college, Maryville College in 1982, that was one of our recession years. And so there weren't a lot of jobs for liberal arts business administration majors with minors in political science and economics. So...
well, that's a mouthful.
Yeah, I know.
Say that again.
Business administration major with a minors in political science and economics. And if I'd stayed one more semester, I could have walked out with 3 degrees. But I was tired of school. So I went on, and during college, I worked my way through school, worked full-time and went to school. And my family was a working family. My dad was in the sign industry, and he told me, we want you to go to college. We don't want you to live the same life we've lived, getting out in the sun, working hard every day. Think you can do better than that, but I can't pay your way through school. Though I can feed you dinner and keep a roof over your head while you're in school. That's actually what I did. Stayed at home, worked full time, actually in my uncle's business. I come from 3 types of family members. They either became school teachers. In my broader Berry family, they were school teachers, sign painters, or Baptist preachers. So messengers, I guess, was what we were.
Yeah. But your dad was more of a military guy.
Yeah, he worked in the sign industry from 1955 until he fell off of the roof of a McDonald's in Morristown at the age of 72 doing maintenance on the word McDonald's that's on the roof. So, and broke his back, and we thought we'd lose him, and he's a tough man. Strongest man I've ever known and the most fit man I've ever known.
That was 11 years ago. You said he was
no, he's 88, so that's 16 years ago. About the time my brother died. And my dad was still recovering, actually, when he passed. But, yeah, Dad was a sign man, and probably touched virtually every sign ever installed in Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg in the early days. The company he started with was in Seymour, and Reed Signs, and the symbol for Pigeon Forge, the blacksmith, my dad's actually the person who drew that sketch.
Is that right?
Yeah, and did that for them.
He didn't get any royalties off.
No, he doesn't. That's not the way he was. And he also was the first company to put up all the Christmas lights for Pigeon Forge. for their Christmas year. So they grew to regret doing that.
How far did y'all live from Pigeon Forge?
In Maryville, that was probably about an hour's drive.
That was a pretty good ways.
Yeah, yeah. My dad commuted from Maryville to Seymour, Tennessee every day up Highway 411. Like clockwork. And in the sign business, you got your work tickets. You left crack of dawn every morning, and you came home when all the work was done. So it was pretty unpredictable, kind of like the world I have today.
Now, Von Orr is south of Maryville, right?
South of Maryville, yeah.
How far south is Von Orr?
Von Orr would be about a half-hour drive from Maryville.
So Loudon wasn't too far of a stretch for you?
No, it's about the same, 30, 40 minutes. Yeah. And, but at any rate, when I left Maryville College, I went to work for my uncle because the only people offering jobs in '82 at Maryville College to business majors were management training for Walmart. Mm. And I just never really thought that retail was for me, even though I worked in it while I was in college, kind of helped pay my way. I sold backpacking equipment while I was in college, so at a place called Mountain Supply in Maryville, which isn't there now, and worked in Gatlinburg a couple of summers for them. We had a store in Gatlinburg, so that was fun.
And that was, up there is where people buy back. That was when they had the aluminum poles on the back.
Yeah, the frames, the extended frames.
And
yeah.
You put your sleeping bag on the top and tie it on.
Yeah, that was the old frame style pack, which was common for scouting. My dad was a scoutmaster for 35 years also. So
do they still have the frames on backpacks like that?
You can still get them, frame packs, but they're not that visible. They're not those squared boxed frames anymore.
I like the
they're
square
molded.
box frames, didn't you?
Yeah,
you knew you were carrying it.
Yeah. But,
you could hang more stuff on it than these new ones.
Oh yeah, one of my old hiking buddies, David Griffin, who spent most of his career working in forestry research at the University of Tennessee. We used to call him Goat Man. Do you remember Goat Man in East Tennessee?
Yeah. Wasn't there a picture of him in the paper here recently?
I think so, but we used to call Dave Goat Man too because he would, when we go on backpacking trips, a week-long trip, he seemed like every pot he found or anything he found in the woods he could find a use for, so he'd just keep tying stuff onto his pack. Before you knew it, you could hear him going down the trail, just like the Goat Man coming down the road.
Didn't want to get rid of it.
No.
Yeah, being a hoarder would be a bad thing to be a hoarder and a backpacker. Right?
Now Dave walked the Appalachian Trail in 1993, so he's a pretty tough.
Have you ever walked it?
Sections of it, but no, I've never had the ability to take 6 months off, nor have I ever really been in the shape to do that. That's 2,150 miles.
I did 5 days of it.
Yeah.
I don't know how far it was or what, but it was 5 days of the Appalachian Trail.
Yeah. I've walked most of the Appalachian Trail in Tennessee, most of it in Georgia and North Carolina, parts in Virginia.
How long is it?
I think it's 2,150 miles now. Used to be 2,050, but they've extended it. So. Took him 6 months and 3 weeks, and he had to take 3 weeks off. In the snowstorm in '93, he got trapped in the Smokies during the Great Snow.
What with 6 months on the Appalachian Trail, wouldn't you have to stop at a store?
Yeah. And he had guys like me sending him care packages. I resupplied him, so.
But to me, that's sort of cheating.
No, well, unless you carry a gun and you start killing everything to eat. But
you can't do that.
He hiked 7 to 10 days at a time, usually before trail towns. And usually you don't go, there are a few towns that the trail goes through the middle of.
Is that what you call trail towns?
Yeah.
Do they cater to people walking the Appalachian
Trail?
Oh
yeah, it's become quite an industry for them. Several thousand people a year try it.
I'd love to do it, but I couldn't take off. They'd shoot me.
Yeah, it's an adventure of a lifetime. It's life-changing. Dave's feet grew. He lost all his body fat.
What do you mean his feet grew?
Well, just walk 2,000 miles, walk 20, 25 miles a day for 6 months.
His feet got bigger?
Yeah.
Longer?
Kind of longer and wider. They just kind of flattened and spread out.
Not literally grown, just sort of reshaped.
Yeah, just reshaped. I had to send him boots 3 times, I think. He wore out 3 pairs of boots. So I was kind of his coordinator, myself and a couple other friends that were hiking buddies, and so he would basically send us a letter or call us and let us know what he was going bad, you know, if he needed a new rain tarp or something like that, a raincoat. And he said generally about every 7 to 10 days you can get close enough to a town to go in and buy some supplies if you need them, but we would send him the stuff he really wanted.
You'd have to take a lot of money with you for 6 months.
Yeah, well, he didn't have a lot of that, so he was dependent upon us to kind of help him. So we knew where the mail. He would tell us which post office, and the post office along the Appalachian Trail basically provides you with. They support the hikers, and they'll hold packages and things. So we'd send him boxes of food products and changes of clothes and things like that. A fresh pair of boots.
Boy, that would you'd break in a new pair of boots in 4 days. Wouldn't you?
Yeah, and that's when they figured out lighter's better. You know, in the early days of backpacking, you had old heavy leather boots.
Yeah.
And now they're all light and
Everything's
fabric
about
material.
weight on that.
Oh yeah, I think he carried about 35 pounds, which is minimalist.
36 pounds would be a big difference, wouldn't it? Just another pound.
Yeah, it could be, and so that was a lot of fun. And we would early on, my other hiking buddies, we dropped him off. We hiked with him up to Springer Mountain where the trail starts. And actually, one of the friends that kind of helped with this, Scott Bell, had blown his knee out, so he was on crutches. So he actually hiked to Springer Mountain on a pair of crutches. And we helped carry some of his gear, and he carried some of it. And then we saw Dave off. There was snow on the ground. It was February 14th, and
he just starts walking.
And he just took off walking from there, and we went back home. And then Scott and I would kind of try to, for the first month or so, while it was, you know, easy drive, try to find him. When we had a free weekend, we'd try to figure out where he was. We didn't know exactly, but knowing how he walked and how the trails were, we'd try to figure out where he was. When surprise him, we'd try to intercept him and be waiting there when he got to camp. And I think we tried 3 times early on and found him 2 of the 3. Missed him 1 time.
I remember hearing the story when I was just young about the boy that got lost up there and they never found him.
Yeah,
you remember
in
that story?
Spencefield. Yeah, my dad actually was on the search and rescue crew for that.
What was that boy's name?
Martin. It's a Martin boy.
Is that his last name?
Uh-huh. And he apparently went out ahead of his parents on, which is a trail I've probably walked 25, 30 times. Went out ahead of his parents and went around the bend of a mountain, and they never saw him again.
They never saw him again, did they? Has that still been a mystery? It's still a mystery.
Yeah, it's an unsolved disappearance.
I remember hearing about that. My uncle told me, and it just blew my mind. I guess I was 8 or 10 at the time, but I've never forgot that.
Yeah.
He was 14. I remember that.
Uh-huh. My dad said he crawled for 4 or 5 days around in laurel thickets looking for him. You know, laurel gets pretty thick in some of them mountain slopes. And
you
that's
can walk
steep
under
country.
it and not even get wet, can't you?
Yeah. Well, and sometimes you can't walk under it. You got to go over the top of it. So, Dad and Army guys and park rangers.
What happened to that boy?
You know, they don't really know for sure. I guess the general thought of the rescue crews was that they searched the area thoroughly, and many of them think that he was grabbed and kidnapped and taken away. But they don't have any definitive decision on that.
It would be hard for a parent to know that their child was not just right around the bend. So it was a shock to them, I'm sure.
Oh, it's devastating, no doubt. And, you know,
if you could talk to them today, they're not over it, are they?
Oh, I would say not. I would say, wouldn't you always wonder what happened? Where they were?
I'd go crazy.
Yeah. It's that's unfortunate. And but no, my dad was active. You know, growing up around Townsend, he was around in the early days of the park. after it just formed. He was born in 32, and they formed the park about 33, I think, and 34. And he, so when he was young, did guides in the park. In the early days of the park, the trail systems weren't as well established.
Sure.
And still building a lot of it, so they used a lot of local guides. So he did some guiding on horseback and things like that. So, and he was a mountain boy. I mean, my dad hunted and fished, and we had a lot of fun together. So, took me on my first hunting trip when I was 4 years old.
Ware Valley is where you can enter the park, also, right? There's Ware Valley, and then there's Gatlin.
Cades Cove and Gatlinburg entrances. Townsend, Gatlinburg, Cherokee.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can go into Metcalf Bottoms area from Wares Valley. But you have the Blount County section, then it kind of go up a rise and go into the Sevier County portion, which is where it opens up into a large valley. The valley's it's narrower and more defined in Blount County.
That was the back in the day they called that the Alleghenies, is that right? Or where is the Alleghenies?
Allegheny Mountains.
Isn't that they called them that? Some people refer to the
I think they were referred in early mappings as some of the
as
Alleghenies.
The Alleghenies. Yeah. Because it's where a lot of the people that came to the United States, to America at that time, migrated through the mountains because they didn't want to associate with
modern civilization.
Modern civilization.
Yeah. I think a lot of folks, my family's
and they were
came into the country in Virginia, and there's still a pocket of the Berry family in Dillwyn, Virginia, which is near Appomattox Courthouse. And then kind of migrated down the Appalachians.
Through the Alleghenies, I think is what they used to call it.
And came down into North Carolina and Tennessee, and then into North Georgia and Alabama.
I watched a 12-hour documentary and the whole premise of the documentary was how the Irish people came through the Alleghenies, through the Appalachian, and how their music and singing in church reflected their religion. It was extremely interesting.
Yeah. Well, I've got Scotch Irish. I'm a Heinz 57. If you look at the do the family genealogy, but more British, Scotch, and Irish.
Well, Scotch and Irish was the ones that headed to the hills.
Yeah,
I think.
And they brought the music we know as bluegrass today.
Yeah, and that's why you like bluegrass today.
And
it's probably in your blood.
Yeah, and and the banjo's African origin, so bluegrass is a combination of African and Irish and Scottish music, kind of blended together. But yeah, I mean, I like bluegrass, and just it tugs at the heart. It's part of my being.
The early '80s would have also been REO Speedwagon, right?
Yep.
Would you like that too?
No,
sure.
I was a Rolling Stones and the Who and
Loverboy.
No, I wasn't a Loverboy fan, but today I can respect the music. I wasn't a Van Halen fan.
Blackfoot.
Blackfoot was one of them that I can remember, and but
Ozzy
Southern rock.
Ozzy Osbourne.
No, I wasn't. I was into. I wasn't into metal that much, really. So,
just
Black Sabbath. I liked Black
Sabbath
when I was young. That was kind of stepping out there.
Yeah, that was. Now, but you were more of a Southern rock.
Oh yeah,
like
Marshall Tucker and the Outlaws and Creedence Clearwater Revival and the band. And but most of my friends I've hung out with are a little older than me growing up, and
Van Halen
John Prine and all those folks.
Van Halen was like just a little bit after you'd have been.
That was my early when I was in college.
Yeah,
basically. And today I like Van Halen and respect Eddie Van Halen's guitar work, but at the time I didn't care for it too much. Didn't listen to it.
So how did
it didn't go well with bluegrass?
No, it's two different things.
Yeah.
But I heard him talking on a talk show, and he really likes bluegrass. He said that was one of his his favorite types of music.
Mm-hmm. I guess a product more of the 70s music. Like I said, the big bands of the day, the rock and roll bands.
Eagles?
Eagles, yeah. I watched a special for them a couple nights ago. And
I saw their last concert in
Did you?
Knoxville, yeah.
Oh, cool. But, Stevie Ray Vaughan, I like. And I like Texas Swing, too. I was a big fan of Bob Wills and his Texas Playboys. And Asleep at the Wheel.
Yeah, you're talking
heard of that?
40s now, right?
Yeah, that's back in the 40s and the 50s. But Asleep at the Wheel is more of a modern era Texas swing band. They played a lot of Bob Wills music, but
Do you play any instruments?
no, don't have a lick
Just
of
play
musical
the radio.
talent. I play the radio. And I've got friends who are great musicians that I go and hang out and be a groupie to.
I think playing a musical instrument is something you just can't learn. Either you can do it or you can't.
My best guitar player I know, Bill Cabbage, he and a couple other friends bought me a guitar 35, 40 years ago. And I tried to play it twice and set it down. I don't have the time for
I don't
that.
either. Or the patience.
And Bill is just a wonderful guitar player and just can play for hours, just sit down, pick up any kind of guitar, plays fiddle well. He probably would call it a violin too. So
Does any of this connect to your current job?
no,
any-
other than it helps make who I am and why I'm
But
here.
it does. It's not really connected other than,
No,
and your job now is to bring industries.
yeah. My primary responsibility working for the chamber is to, one, help maintain the existing manufacturing base and warehouse and distribution, the larger employer bases, corporate offices, and then to go out and try to identify projects and companies and attract them here to make investments. So I work new markets as well as established and existing industry base, and have a couple of staff people that work with me to help maintain that flow.
Is that sort of a separate division of the chamber, I guess?
Yes, we're divided. We have, basically general membership, which includes small business programming, more your retail sector, support services and programming, and business startup programming. Then we have an Economic Development Council, which is required under Tennessee law. It's in a 32-member board that has specific community roles identified and permanently on it, and they serve as an advisory board to me. And we have 4 quarterly meetings, and where I report what we're working on, and they basically give feedback from their perspectives on what's going on. It's an informational exchange and helps us develop programming. And then Melissa Woody, my counterpart as a vice president, heads the tourism division. So you have general membership, general chamber services, economic development council, and tourism council.
Is that 3 or 4?
3. And then workforce development initiatives operate under Economic Development Council.
And this is the same thing you did in Loudon?
A little different structure. I didn't work for a Chamber of Commerce there. I worked for a nonprofit industrial development corporation known as the Loudoun County Industrial Committee of 100. And that was a format that was established in the 60s, committees of 100, and it was essentially, in its beginning, 100 business people donating $100 a year to find a staff person to work on behalf of industry to build better market conditions and a better market for them to operate in, as well as to go out and attract new supporting industries.
What would happen if you didn't get more industries here? Would we dry up?
In my opinion, our economy would kind of terrace or plateau and either stabilize and begin a slow decline, or if there were large enough structural shifts in industry to where the existing base kind of lost its market position or went through its life
that
cycle.
could happen. I mean, if our biggest industry was making buggy whips,
No, we wouldn't have much right now.
We didn't have nothing.
Yeah. We've got to recognize that economies are living organisms in a sense, and that they're continuously evolving, and communities have to learn to evolve with them. And that's the big ultimate challenge that we face when we're doing this, is that, you know, everybody has a vision of what the perfect town is and where they want to live.
Everybody wants to live in Mayberry, but they want to have the industry of that manufacturing plants that are paying $40 an hour.
Yeah.
You can't have both. Can
No,
you?
those don't go together. If you're going to live in Mayberry, you're going to do textiles, and you're going to do woodworking, and you're going to go do the traditional Southern industries.
And that would die just as soon as the industry changed.
Yeah. I mean, look at the dramatic changes that have occurred. This town was full of textile operations and creameries and things of that nature, you know, back in the 30s and the 40s. And
not much unlike Loudon. I mean,
Yeah.
same valley, I guess.
Oh yeah, I mean, the southern industrial development centered on resource exploitation, and resources could be cheap labor, inexpensive labor from the farm. It could be.
Well, this is interesting.
When you look at the southern industrial revolution, it was predominantly northern businesses, established manufacturers of the north, that came down here and established operations to, you know, cut cost by taking advantage of farm labor, transferring it into the industry, and were able to work it at a cheaper wage rate. And then we had abundant natural resources, whether it was the ability to grow cotton for textiles or a lot of wood.
Copper.
Copper here is a perfect example. The smelting.
Because they were transferring that by train up north, right?
Yeah. So, and then ultimately the foundry operations settled in Chattanooga. So you had Birmingham and Chattanooga were modern day steel towns. Combustion, you know, and all those companies. But yeah, I mean, let's face it. You know, business is chasing expense and reducing expense and improving profit margins.
So business chases expense.
Yeah, they're always looking for ways to shave the cents off so that they can make a little more money and make it more worth their while. So, and in today's experience, we have the stockholder who has demands for dividends and value growth in their stock, and that's what a lot of the struggles that we have in economic development are centered around the increased expectations for return on investment. And I share with people lots of times that, you know, when I was in business school in the late 70s and early 80s, you know, when you talked about corporate returns, you know, the numbers were 6 to 8%. You know, you were doing well if you were making 6-8% a year on your effort. And you know, you're in real estate now. People look to get 16 to 25% annualized return. Well, that puts a lot of pressure to cut costs in corporate America, and that creates a lot of the pressures we see for wages and the competition that we ultimately see when we're trying to attract a new industry, because we've you know, we deal with what's it cost to treat water, sewer, what does it cost for electricity. And I mean, you know, I ran projects over the past couple of months that were massive power users, and they were looking at, you know, $10-20 million a year electric bills.
Well, how would that
so
compare?
Cutting a penny or two off kilowatt hour can mean a lot in that scenario.
Boy. Now, talking about how industries change, expense is one thing, but all of a sudden the whole world may not want this product anymore. I don't know what it is, but let's say this electric car takes off.
Yeah.
What could that do to all car manufacturers? And everything can have a spin-off. But that's one thing about Cleveland is we're so diverse. We have a lot of diversity. We're not reliant on any one industry.
We have a pretty heavy concentration when you look at the employment numbers in the appliance industry with Whirlpool's presence here. I mean, they employ 1,500 of the 9,000 manufacturing workers we have. So that's a pretty good chunk, and we'd feel it if something happened to Whirlpool, and that's why we worked so hard in 2010 and 11 to ensure that they stayed here when they had recognized that their old plants, that were many of them close to 100 years old from an operational standpoint, could no longer function. And so we certainly have some concentrations that are concerning, and part of my job is to try to look at ways that we can continue to diversify our industry mix, but also to try to specifically target industries that don't create automatic competition within our existing industry mix. So we're always trying to get existing industry to help us understand what can we do to attract people who feed you, materials, parts, pieces. Are there end customers that we can go after that kind of improve your business environment? We try to maintain dialogues with them so that we can complement them and bring in the resources that they need to improve their profitability and operations so that they can continue to grow here.
And
growing existing jobs is the most important thing, because that's where most of them come from, is the companies that are already here. We always give all the attention to the new one, the new shiny toy, but we should never forget that we've been making stoves here, or stove parts, for over 100 years now. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty impressive. And we've been making clothes for over 100 years here. Mm-hmm. And we've been making chemicals for 100 years here. So, and the chemicals came here because of the clothing. Manufacturers.
You mean like Olin?
Yeah, our manufacturer's chemical. They've celebrated 100 years of existence.
Manufacturer, that's what I call Bowaters, right? No, which one?
No, Manufacturer's Chemicals, a small operation out here off of Old Tasso Road. Mm. Not small. I mean, they have quite a few employees, but they do chemical blends and mixtures that were originally for treating of fabrics.
What is the smallest manufacturing company? What's the you say there's 9,000 manufacturing jobs.
Yeah.
And Whirlpool having 1,500. Would a small one have as many as 3?
There are quite a few small support manufacturers that are making subcomponents that are in the 3 to 6 employee range in our industrial directory. And
how do you attract somebody to come here? I mean, how do you even know they're looking to come here?
Networks and time. That's where it's advantaged to have an old man like me. I've been out here beating the streets since 1985 looking for projects.
So if a company in Utah decided that they're looking for a new location, odds are you would get wind of it and you would see if it fits something that might be here.
Yeah. I guess the easy way to explain it is that, when a company makes a decision that they need to expand operations or add a second operation or even relocate. And by the way, I do want to say this. I've relocated very few industries in my day. I generally, philosophically, don't like the thought of going and taking a business from another community.
Yeah.
Any more than I want someone in here knocking on the doors for my industry.
Right.
But when a company makes a decision that they need to relocate or expand operations, then they're going to sit down and define, why do we need to do this? And generally speaking, it's because they need to find a better labor pool, they need to find better energy cost, or they need to position themselves closer to the raw material sources that they need for their production. Or in some cases, if the product is a heavy product, the decision can be influenced by they want to set themselves as close to their market, their end user, as they can to reduce the cost of getting that product to them. And when I first came into the business in the 80s and started working in Loudoun County in 1987, at that time, most corporations had their own real estate staffs, and they had their own teams that would source the sites. It was a very different dynamic then. As time has progressed, and then as I got into the business, when you got into the heavy industry like paper and chemical and all those, which is actually the types of industries I started working with early on, they hired large engineering and construction firms that essentially did turnkey packages. They helped them identify what their site needs were, then went out and supported them with technical staff, engineers and architects to go out and evaluate sites, and then they would build the plant for them and hand them the keys, essentially. And my early projects in Loudoun County were with Kimberly-Clark Corporation and with Eastman Kodak, and they worked with the two largest. I got my first two big lands and projects were working with two of the largest engineering, design, and construction companies in the world, Fluor Corporation and CRS Serene. And those were 18 to 24 month evaluations and negotiations that and I competed, our community, when I say I, it's the community, competed with 60 to 80 different sites for that investment. So it was really a matter of elimination. Mm-hmm. Economic developers try to make it to the next round. Their job is to make it to the next round, to get to the next level of conversations, to then refine the product that we're trying to put together for them, refine the cost, to then, you're essentially working to not get cut. And corporations, when they start those processes, let's face it, how many cities are there in America? How many counties? There are 400 plus metropolitan areas, so at any given time you could be competing with 400 different places. Not to mention how overwhelming that would be for the guys that had to do that.
And if you say what are they looking for, they're all different.
Every project is different. They have different needs, and so really you have to clear the slate and start over with everyone. I can sometimes borrow information from one project to the next, and our demographics are the same.
Yeah.
But
so what would the first thing do? You'd have to they'll say, well, send us a package?
Basically what happens today, what happens is that I go out and travel and work trade shows and as well as site consulting organizations. Unlike when I started in the mid-'80s, today the industry is predominantly driven by third-party site location consultants. So these are briefcases that go out and continuously work industrial markets and identify projects and then basically negotiate, to be their representative and lead them in a site selection process. And 3 weeks ago, I was in Orlando at the Site Selectors Guild with 58 of the nation's top site location consultants. They have 2 conferences or sessions a year and have limited and allow roughly 300 economic developers across the world to join them for informal discussions, relationship building, and networking, as well as they provide insights on what trends they see going in the industrial markets. And so we do that kind of work, but essentially what companies do is they sit down with these folks, they identify what their needs are, kind of hone in on a region, and then the consultants put out a request for information. So we refer to them as RFIs, or RFPs when you get a little further in. But and those tend to come from several sources, either through my established network over my career of interface with companies, or from the state of Tennessee or the Tennessee Valley Authority. They have full-time staffs that are out proactively marketing to industry groups and target markets.
And it's important to get these industries here to pay more money and to keep us from being ousted by an industry that may be no longer.
Yeah, I mean, when we were dealing with the Whirlpool project, there was, at one point in time, there was a comment made by a person in this community that was involved in leadership, Tom Wheeler with Cleveland Utilities. And there was a lot of angst about how far do we go, what kind of an incentive package do we do. You know, we've given Whirlpool the best tax incentive package we've ever given as a community. But they're the largest contributing manufacturer in the history of Bradley County, and from that purpose deserve that, to retain them. But we were looking at potential of losing that plant because they couldn't continue to operate in 3 plant sites, 7 floor elevations, and I think they told me at one time that a stove traveled 7 miles in production. You know, that alone told me gross inefficiencies and lost profit. And they decided as a company that they had to fix it, and they came to us essentially, and we went to Nashville and met with corporate real estate staff at Whirlpool, and in Nashville at the Commissioner's Office of Economic and Community Development, and they told us that you know, they want to work with us to identify a new site to build a state-of-the-art modern manufacturing facility, which we're lucky enough to work out. The first thing they told us was that they wanted to continue operating where they were, and they wanted to build a facility adjacent to where they were. So the first ask on that project was for us to assemble a site so that they could build 1 million square feet essentially next door or overlapping into the property they had. And intuitively, having been around redevelopment, and I worked for the city of Knoxville, I did not think that was a way that an approach that we'd be able to be successful at. And so we basically said, well, we'll take a look at what it would take to do that. And that's when I came back and knuckled down and did some site analysis and determined what area it would take to build that plant. And it turns out that we would have had to have acquired 300 different property owners to do that where they're at. And that would have included churches, which generally speaking you don't go and buy.
Right.
So at that point in time, we had to make a decision, and we sat down, and I basically said, you know, we can't do this, but we have options that we can pursue. And so we then went back to Whirlpool and sat down and said, you know, here's what it's going to take, and we don't think we can. If we can do it, it's going to take 2 to 3 years to assemble. And they didn't give us 2 to 3 years. But we told them that we think we have alternate sites that we can pull together, and asked them for some time to try to come up with alternate site options to present to them. And they gave us 90 days, basically, at that point in time. And so I went back to the office, got over my panic attack, and started looking for sites. And we identified 6 site locations that we felt as though they could build what they today have, and presented those to them, and then narrowed it down to where they're at today on Benton Pike. And that took about a year of negotiations and conversations and convincing and cajoling. And also during that time, it took some pretty bold initiatives on the part of Cleveland Utilities. To this day, I know that Whirlpool would not be here on the site they're on today if it weren't for the leadership of Tom Wheeler and Cleveland Utilities. We had a 69,000 volt kV transmission line that ran through the center of the site at a diagonal, and underneath it was a 20-inch water line. And before we were able to get everything wrapped down, and it was all privately held land, Tom Wheeler convinced Cleveland Utilities Board to go ahead and take a leadership role and to relocate those utilities so that they could build that plant there. And so
they had to know they were coming before they did it, right?
No. Tom committed to doing that to help make the commitment.
Because somebody has to go first, right?
Yeah, somebody has to go first. Somebody has to spend money first. And in this case, Tom Wheeler basically sat down and in a board meeting said, you know what? Things are changing continuously. And when I look back at our roles, our utility roles, there have been 25 industries shut down over the last 20 years. You know, he kind of read a list and said, what's common about all these? They're not here anymore. And essentially said, we need to make this happen and we need to keep it here. And I certainly agreed with him. And with 3 generations plus of history, you know, one of the problems I faced when I was out trying to do my research was every time I'd go to the city of Cleveland or to the GIS department to get mapping about a site, you know, or I'd go and get mapping on, the worst thing that happened is I went and pulled mapping on the existing Whirlpool facility at the city of Cleveland, and a person that was helping me in their GIS department goes, why are you pulling all this mapping on Whirlpool? And I said, well, I'm working on some things with them, because at that time nobody knew what was going on. And and I said, why are you asking? Why would you ask? And she goes, well, my grandfather and my father and my husband all work at Whirlpool. God. You know, it's when people make those comments, it's when economic developers kind of get a little extra motivation, and sometimes you get a pit in your stomach because you realize suddenly, you know, I could affect generations of families and their well-being if I make a mistake or if I don't pull this through. And by all means, it's not me.
So you didn't think, well, I'll do the best I can. You really felt
I'm passionate about what I do, and I don't like to lose. But I lose a lot of deals. I mean, that's the nature of the beast. Over my career, for every 100 project leads I get, I've locate 3 or 4 of them.
And you have to work those hundreds, right?
Yeah.
I bet you send that package out all the time, right?
I sent out 15 of them in June, or in May. I sent out 5 in June. You know, it ebbs and flows, but I'll talk to 90 to 100 a year in this market easily.
And the odds of getting them are 0.01, I guess, right?
It's very competitive, and you know, sometimes communities have good days and bad days in how they look at things, and
then they might decide not to even move.
Yeah.
On their end, they could.
I have a lot of I'd say at least 25%, maybe as much as 50% in some years. The projects never pull the trigger.
It's not even going to happen anyway.
No. I mean, they spend a lot of money to try to figure it out, but sometimes when they look at all the options, there's not one that makes sense for them. And or they can't find the right site in the right location. And
do you think manufacturing will ever be, will robotics and that sort of stuff take over so much that manufacturing plants just do not need that many people?
Based on how difficult it is to hire in manufacturing, well, in general today, we're going to see a lot more automation in a lot of things, including retail and restaurants. You know, McDonald's has been working on ways to mechanize their food production for years, and the kiosks that you see in a McDonald's, those are all a reaction to the reality of it's getting harder and harder to find workers, namely because our population growth rates have slowed. And our peak population, that baby boomer generation is
so the whole United States, the population of people entering the workforce is lower.
Yeah.
Not because necessarily unemployment and all this other stuff. It's because the baby boomers are gone. People don't have that many kids anymore. Right?
No, they don't. And
is there a statistic that said 1940 they had so many and now they have so many?
I'm sure you can find it. I've not personally looked that data up, but you know, the trend we've been seeing, what I've been monitoring since I've been here, and I came here in May of 2009, was average age. just looking at the census data.
What's the average age of when you
We're
do
in
you
the
say
we're in the we're 39.4, I think, right
do you
now.
use the term Cleveland or Bradley County when you're talking to people?
Generally speaking, that starts with Chattanooga region, because Chattanooga is a recognizable name, and it's large enough to where people.
And they've got to have
No.
sewer.
Yeah.
So you almost got to say Cleveland.
Yeah. I usually refer to us as Cleveland Bradley County. When I send out a package, it's always titled Cleveland-Bradley County, Tennessee.
So the average age in Cleveland Bradley County is 39 and a half years old.
Yeah, roughly.
We're above
And it's
average.
been ticking. Well,
What would it
we're
have been?
about the same average age as Tennessee, and we're talking a tenth of a year probably.
What
difference
was
in
it
the US.
when you first came here?
It was 38s, high 38s. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but in statistics over a 10-year period, that's quite about a lot of change. And I think, what I'm seeing today is that, the dilemma we face in manufacturing is that as labor costs go up, there's always a driver to try to minimize labor expense. And so that's when they look at automation. And now they'll be looking at automation more so just because not so much as an expense, it's just there's just not people that want to work in manufacturing.
And there's been more inventions on automation.
Yeah.
So you got
robotics. But what that does though is once a robot replaces a human, it still has to have a human to maintain it.
But not as many, obviously.
Yeah,
right?
not as many, but those are higher skills and better wages. So the automation of industry, while it reduces the numbers, it increases the skill sets and increases the wage basis that those employees make, and that's the most important consideration that I'm working with when I'm looking at our community. I look at what kind of tax base do we establish, and the basic math of my business is how much land area do we have potential to develop. We've never really well defined that in Bradley County, but infrastructure drives that: roads, sewer, and water, electricity. And but you've got the land area. You've got to also look at I just went blank. Taxes, yeah. I mean, we're trying to, how much can we generate in taxes per acre is one of the calculations that I'm trying to do, and trying to maximize how I use land for industry by capital intensity, because that provides the county the most stable tax base over time, even if we negotiate and discount taxes. And so, for instance, you take Vocker, they consume 500 acres of Bradley County, and they're paying $4 million a year in property taxes. That piece of property, I think, in total was paying $2,000 or $3,000 a year of property taxes in its agricultural state. So there's great benefit to the county for operations, which then minimizes impacts on the residential markets and the tax rates.
And all of this is so we will have better and more jobs in 10 years.
Yes.
Not next week, not next year, because this stuff you're talking about, you're on the very, very, very front line of just the thought of a new industry. So
Yeah.
we're talking they have to decide to come, they have to build it, they have to
Get it operational.
It's
It takes 3 to 5 years to get those things settled in.
We're fine.
and be
So
right.
what you're doing tomorrow is for 5 years from now.
Yeah,
You'll be retired by then.
I hope so. But you want to have a lasting impact. I'm proud I can drive to Loudon and I can look at a Kimberly-Clark tissue mill today that I did at the age of 29. And I think, that's 30
Did
plus
you feel like a
years.
rock star?
It goes to your head a little bit when you're young and you do that.
Did you get sunglasses? And
yeah, I had my sunglasses and grew my stash extra long and all that. No, I've tried to stay grounded. And my friends, I still hang out with my truck driving friends and my guys from high school and scouts and stuff. So they don't let me get too big britchy. They used to make a lot of fun of it. Remember when your first phone was mounted in your car?
Oh, yeah.
You would not believe the grief I got from my friends when I showed up with a car phone.
I had one, and when somebody walked to the door, I'd cover it up so they wouldn't make fun of me.
Yeah,
I wasn't even convinced I needed it.
Yeah, I wasn't either. And but my bosses told me, my board told me in Loudon that you need a cell phone.
Did you have a brick? Remember the brick?
No, I never had a brick. Mine was always more or less just a corded phone on a pedestal mount. So
yeah. But
driving down the road.
You always had to push and it had the dial on the top of it.
Yep. But my buddies that I threw darts with and drank a few cold beers with. They kept me honest.
Is there any phone booths anywhere in Bradley County now?
I haven't seen one, but I can remember waiting in line in airports early in my career to get a phone.
I remember
to make phone calls.
I bet there's not one.
No, I don't think there is. I don't see why there would be.
There might be one at the pilot station on Inman. There might be one there. I'm not positive.
Huh. I have to look around and see if I can find one. But those aren't. Those are the old days.
Now, what happens with if manufacturing does go away? I mean, if you.
Well, I think the basic economics of a manufacturer are that manufacturers are making products to then distribute and sell around the world. So when they sell those products and ship them out, they're bringing fresh dollars into our economy. So, and then the employees get their wages, and that's new money coming into our economy, which then disperses into the retail sectors and the service sectors, and then it starts its rotations, the cycles of the dollar. Mm-hmm. And if you take out manufacturing and tourism, then what you're doing is essentially cutting off an artery, an inflow of new money, of cash.
Now you're giving me the money and I'm giving you money. It's back and forth.
We're just exchanging the same dollar, which has value, but it's just the same dollar rotating around in the same market.
Wasn't there an old saying sometimes you have to do other people's laundry, or there's a saying. I think what it means is it I can't sell to my brother and him sell to me. Every now and then we got to go outside and bring new money in, like you're talking about.
Oh yeah, it's not rocket science. It's basic economics that we work under, and I've always tried to follow. I mean, manufacturing will bring in fresh money that then gets to circulate, so that builds wealth. That's where gross domestic product is an important item to understand. I think our GDP as a county is in the $4.9 billion now.
What products do they not count in that? Let's say they don't count milk and bread, right? Or do they?
Gross domestic? No, they don't. I think that's just finished manufactured goods and services that go out, not necessarily consumables.
Now, could you get rid of manufacturing but still keep tourism and be okay? Then you'd be just like these cities like these hiking towns.
Yeah.
That's all they have is...
Well, they're usually pretty small towns and pretty modest towns. No, I think, Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge is probably the nation's best example of tourism. Sevier County.
Would you say it's possibly the best example?
Oh, yeah.
I can't think of another one.
It's the most visited area for vacationers. I mean, if you look at the Great Smoky Mountains, it attracts more visitors than any other national park.
Would it attract
by an order of three?
Would it attract more than, say, Chicago?
Probably not. Because Chicago has that mixture of business destination as well as it's a cool place to go visit, tourism.
But as far as tourism, would Smoky Mountains have more people come there than people would go to Chicago?
I don't know
If
that
they
you
were
can really
tourists.
compare those. For as if they were tourists,
There wouldn't be
yeah,
any-
I would expect that Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge probably have more pure tourists.
Yeah, and
But-
if you were, but Chicago would be more business/tourism.
And but then you look at New York. I mean, New York is a huge tourism destination, and for people for the arts and entertainment. So it just depends upon what your niche is. But you know, the problem that's haunted Sevier County is lower wage, lower per capita income levels, because tourism jobs have tended to be lower on the pay scales, closer to the minimum wage rates.
They're not. They're not keeping a robotic arm in tune to build a car.
Yeah, no, and they're not machinists that's
Right.
making the next tool to stamp the next part either. So, and they've been working there. They've been in this internal struggle about, the tourism industry doesn't want to see excessive wage growth because their business models start adjusting and the numbers don't look as good. So, in essence, there's always been a certain tension between attracting manufacturing jobs and tourism that my counterpart up there faces that we don't face here.
Well, it's hard to go to somewhere like Dollywood when you're passing a manufacturing plant. You want to feel like you're in this
You don't want to think about your
parallel
job.
universe that's. You don't want to think about any work,
Yeah.
anything related to work.
And Sevierville's attentive to that, and so their industrial parks are on the other side of the interstate, and they're behind the ridge, and they're generally
For that
they're
reason,
considered-
I
yeah.
guess.
Yeah, that's part of the reason they do that, is they don't want to distract too much from a person's vacation mindset. That's a true machine, and it's an amazing machine.
What do you do with these old motels that are no longer like say some of these older motels in town? You're obviously not going to get business people to come and stay there, or anybody for tourism.
Mm-hmm.
What becomes of them? Do they become
Worker housing, temporary housing.
but they don't have kitchens,
Yeah.
so they have like a microwave and a little refrigerator?
Yeah.
And
It's certainly not anything anyone should want a person to have to live in. I think what we should probably look at as they age out, and of course, as long as the owners can define a viable business operation out of them, then our job's to support them and to try to help them any way we can.
but what do they do?
I think we need to start looking at converting some of those into alternative housing for the homeless or for disadvantaged people that are trying to get a hand up.
But who pays for it?
I think we as a society have to come to terms with, we all got to try to figure that out and figure out how we can all help.
Well, that's what they're thinking about in these big like California. They're taking some of the older motels and they're actually moving people in, and the government is paying to have them there. And I don't know.
I think we have to look at the cost of them not getting government support to society that we have through theft and drug abuse and all those other costs. Unpaid medical expenses.
How much
and all
would you
those
pay
things.
for them not to be lined up in front of this out here on the street?
Yeah.
It's something we got to deal with, don't we?
Yeah. I'm not, let's just put it this way. We need to maintain our humanity. And there are a lot of complex issues, and this world is complex. I mean, it confuses me and scares the hell out of me at times. I don't know that I'm happy with the direction of our country today. I don't like the adversarial attitudes that we see in politics, and I think all politicians need to be shook and told to focus on a job. Quit looking at everybody as your damn enemy.
And quit going along with trends.
Trends, yeah, and quit looking at the optics. Quit looking at the
What do you mean,
polling.
look at the optics? What are optics?
Optics create an impression for the media.
The way it looks, the way something looks.
It's more about how does it look as opposed to what did I actually accomplish from it. I've heard those statements.
Yeah.
I've been around politicians since I started in this business in 1985. And I've seen a lot of change, and it's not good. And, and I love all of our local elected officials, and I work with them, and we agree to disagree. Philosophically, I'm not perfectly aligned with any single politician in this community. I'm sure most consider me more liberal politically than they are. I still consider myself left of center. I'm a moderate. I mean, I'm not overwhelmingly supportive of far left policy approaches, and I'm not in love with far right policies.
You're like me. You're just a libertarian.
I don't know that I'm a libertarian, but I believe in government. I do believe government has a viable role, and I think the quality of our government is wholly defined by the quality of the politicians we elect.
Even if you didn't like the government, don't you still have to have them?
Well, of course.
And we got to have them.
It's obscene to think that we can operate a country and a society without a government and rules and regulations and laws.
Well, when I go home tonight and get in bed, I'm not going to check and see if something's on fire because we got a fire department.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that.
Public safety is an important role of government, but infrastructure, sewer and water.
I'm a layman, so I don't know everything, but you would think that we need to do major utility expansion in Cleveland, and I don't think it's as much the road as it is utilities.
Yeah. I was a developer. You know it's getting hard to, we have poor soil, so if you're in the residential industry, you can't just go to any piece of land and start putting houses on it.
Oh, yeah, and before you can put a septic tank, you got to prove you can put 6 of them on it.
Yeah.
In case 5 go bad.
Yeah.
So, so you can forget that. So you got progress follows sewer, right?
Yeah, and
does sewer follow progress? Which is it?
No, progress follows the sewer and the water and the roads.
Period.
And part of the role of economic development, and sometimes if you have visionary leadership, sometimes the roles that we take, when the Industrial Development Board develops an industrial park, one, it's because there's always my entire career in East Tennessee, which is Republican, conservative, Southern mindset. Mm-hmm. I've always worked in heavily Republican administrations and communities. And, the bottom line is that we have public industrial parks are strategic developments to, one, start services to an area, and to two is to make sure that we have some role in guiding these intense uses to where they have the least impact on us as a community.
I've built spec houses before.
Yeah.
Go out, buy a lot where there's water and sewer, build a house, hope to sell it. But in order to do what you're doing, you've got to really speculate. You can't send these packets out without a place for them to go.
I have to.
I mean, first you have to have a place.
You have to have a place for them to go. So
now
product. Our product is land and/or buildings.
Is that not the ultimate spec housing or spec building or?
Yeah. Yeah, we don't roll in small numbers. You can't. We spend $100,000, $1 million at a time when we do things. So we got to be real careful, and and I understand everything that I'm doing on behalf of local government and the city and the county. And I'm also, beyond that, I've got 117,000 residents that I'm responsible for being a steward of the resources they've allocated to us. So I take it seriously. It's not frivolous. And so does the board members, the voluntary board members that are appointed by the city and the county. We have disagreements. We try to iron those out.
If you didn't have disagreements,
places,
you're probably not
we're not
thinking
pushing
about
the
it
limit.
enough.
you know, my job's to kind of always help this community try to find the extra step to take, to push that wall and to try to take another step in a direction that we may have been uncomfortable with. And we have to do that through consensus building. But without land, without buildings, and I mutter a lot of four-letter words to myself during the course of the day because I'll see projects that are exciting. Vertical agriculture is a big pocket that's kind of swept through looking for sites this year. Well, vertical agriculture is, it's greenhouse gardening. It's growing fruits and vegetables close to big markets. And
why do they call it vertical?
I still don't know the answer to that. Ultimately, I'll have to see a process to understand it. But it's an indoor growing operation without dirt that minimizes human touch. So it's a highly automated process. But I worked 3 projects this year, one of which I thought we had a good site for. And those projects have all kind of stalled out. And I don't know if it was a cost basis. When they started looking at what it's going to cost to develop a site, they kind of lost the momentum. Or if the market opportunity kind of the door closed on them. Sometimes, we're working with companies who are forming a market idea. So, there are projects that never happen that we work on. There are projects that happen, and there are projects we lose.
I've noticed that when I figure a job that they decide not to do, at least I've gained something by figuring the job.
You've gained some knowledge. And we learn from every experience we've had, even the losses. The losses actually teach you more.
Yeah.
And, the hardest thing in my business, and I guess the thing that I always fret over and worry over is, do I individually do I make comments or say things which cool a person to us? I'm always fearful of me having a bad day and that influencing a decision, because those decisions ultimately result in better livelihoods for citizens. So it's a tense world.
I would think that the decision would go beyond that personalities and stuff like that.
Most of the time it does, but it can get down to that. Remember, teams are looking for reasons to eliminate you. When I start the process, they are looking at me stone cold,
saying, "Give us one reason to eliminate
you,"
because they don't want to look
at a reason to cut you off the list. So I now just have 57 sites to worry about. And so you got to kind of dance. Mm-hmm. A good example is Cannon Automotive, our first tenant in the Spring Branch Industrial Park. It's a hot stamping plant, Canadian company. We were actually in a unique circumstance with that project. They came and looked at the site in January of 2020. I had one site visit that I participated in with the senior design engineer, process engineer. And the state is who actually made the initial introduction. They're the ones who the company approached. The state sent out a request for information on sites under the parameters the company had laid out, and I responded and sent the state a package, which they forwarded on. The company decided to come down and look around, and they were looking in Mississippi, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, South Carolina. We compete with South Carolina a lot, by the way. And
wonder why that is.
I think our states have good business environments, low taxes. Everybody wants to pay less taxes, so that applies to business. We've got right to work isn't as important as it was when I started in the business, because most states have right to work laws now. More have them than don't. So back when I started, Tennessee was one of 6 states with a right to work law. And that was important if you had a heavily unionized industry sector. And but essentially what Cannon did, they came down to take a first look at the sites, and they scheduled a half hour I mean, my first meeting with a company is usually anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour.
Well, if you're 5 minutes late, you're really messed up.
Oh, you're never late.
Get there early.
I'm late at everything but prospect
Yeah.
visits, and I'm always there early.
Yeah.
And but and so I met the state out at exit 20, drove them in on the road into the park, and showed them this site we'd just graded out flat as after we got a grant from TVA, and the guy gets out of the car. He's with two people I know from the state of Tennessee. We introduce ourselves, but they don't give names usually, and they don't identify who they are. So you spend most of your time just dealing with an anonymous person. And you know what the industry is and what the jobs and investment are. And so this guy gets out of the car, looks around the site. I give my little 5-minute or 2-minute elevator speech. It's really 5 minutes. And about the community and the site and the park and what we're hoping to achieve. He looks around, looks at me, goes, "Thank you," goes and gets in the car. The two state people look at me and we kind of make eye contact and a question mark, and they go and get in the car and drive off. And I thought to myself, he either didn't like me or he didn't like the site.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, by March, we were negotiating on the land, and we were also at the same time negotiating with a company that did the exact same thing from Germany. And we literally had two companies doing the same fundamental business, trying to find a site at the same time. And the industrial board ultimately had to sit down and decide which of the two projects did we want to focus on and which one did we want to basically take a back seat to. And we were having negotiations with both parties concurrently. And essentially the thing that, as time went on and we began the COVID telephone and Zoom dialogue with the company, we started developing a relationship and getting to know them, and ultimately were able to work out the deal, and to do a deal with a Canadian company that wasn't as costly to us as it would have been with the Germans. So we essentially opted to focus our energy on the Canadian firm because we felt as though they had a better sense of what they wanted to achieve at the time, and they were not necessarily as interested in what you're going to give me as the German company was. And so that's a case where we felt as though we were going to build a better community company relationship because their expectations weren't give me, give me, give me. It was more strategic and partnering. Now, after we closed that deal, and I was sitting at dinner about 2 months ago with the engineer that was the first person I ever saw on the project. We were kind of having a few cocktails and talking about the project with the team that was building it now. And I just made the comment, I said, the first time we met, I could have sworn I'd never see you again. You gave me no indication that you liked our site. And he looks at me and smiles and he goes, "Oh, I was about to wet my pants. This was the most beautiful site I had seen, and I did not want you to know that I was so excited about it." And I told him he did a great job. But that's a case where the beauty of the site was what attracted him. And it's sitting on the interstate, and it's not too far from a big auto manufacturer.
And they didn't have to cut a hill down.
And they didn't have to cut a hill down, and that's an important consideration. When I did my Kimberly-Clark project in Loudon in 1989, that was the first project I ever negotiated. I had been in graduate planning school and interned at the state's high technology initiative in Oak Ridge, Knoxville, and had been working for a year for them. So I worked in the state's high technology initiative, which was trying to spin off companies from Oak Ridge National Laboratory and the research complex there. So my master's work thesis research was on Research Triangle Park and Stanford Research Park, and a comparison of University of Tennessee and Tennessee High Technology Initiative to those two entities. it was pretty critical too.
That cannon place, how many is it going to employ?
197 over three to 4 years. And ultimately will be about $114 million investment as they plan it today and see it today. $68 million investment now. And it'll create, those 197 jobs will tool up pretty steadily over a 4-year period. Which was another thing that we had to consider. Our labor market is stressed and everybody has help wanted signs up. More so in the lower wage retail. The closer you get to paying minimum wage, the more stress there is in that labor pool and the more demand there is for workers right now. And some of the models are going to have to be rethought in retail. I mean, wages are going to have to go up to attract some people back to it, in my opinion. And I don't know that that's a bad thing. It's inconvenient for a period of time for business people.
Well, it's been behind so long that it's just sort of catching up now.
I think we all ought to try to live on $7.25 an hour.
Well, if I couldn't do it. Could you?
No, but I did at one point in time in my life.
Yeah, but that was when.
That was back when I just mostly needed beer money and gas money.
Yeah.
So, and Mom and Dad would always have a roof if you needed it.
Yeah.
Now apparently Mom and Dad are the roof. Forever.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
yeah.
But no, it's. But at any rate, when I did the Kimberly-Clark project in 1989, that was a 2-year process. Literally, we went out and we found farms, and we developed a farm into an industrial park with an anchor tenant. So we identified a farm on the Tennessee River that was willing to sell, negotiated a purchase, and then sold half of it to Kimberly-Clark and took the remaining half and built the industrial park as we serviced Kimberly-Clark.
But you had an anchor.
We had an anchor. And that was the way you did it then, because typically you had a 2 to 3 year window for them to site the plant and to build it and get it up and going. Today, companies generally are looking to construct, no matter what the size, within a year. And the expectation is that they're going to come to a community and they're going to find a mostly graded site with all the utilities already there. On Kimberly-Clark, we built a road, we built water and sewer lines, we pulled electric lines. We did all of that while they were building the plant. Today, we have sites like that we still market and promote. But in 12 years, I've not been able to find somebody to buy it because I've never found the project that could wait the time it took to get all that infrastructure to them to get operational. So that's companies shifting risk towards communities.
That's right.
The bottom line is that the cost shift is coming to the community. And if we're going to compete, and I don't like this, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I don't think it's another way corporate America's shifting the burden to others.
But they are.
But they are. And if we're going to attract a new industry, we're going to have to take a deep breath and take a swallow and figure out how to do it.
Well, and the fact is, somebody's going to come. We might as well put it in, right? I guess. When
Yeah.
you say that.
Oh, if you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
I've never seen an industrial park or a piece of infrastructure that didn't get utilized.
Eventually.
Eventually,
Right?
yeah. And the communities that think ahead and plan ahead and are always pushing pipe beyond where they need it today are the ones that grow logically, have more efficient operations over time, and have better lifestyles because they've thought it through. I'm an urban planner by training.
Again, that's a 20-year.
Taking a 10 to 20 year approach. I think you're on the planning commission, aren't you?
I was.
You were?
I got off.
Okay. That's a tough job. That's the hardest job in
it's a
local
tough job.
communities.
Well,
Because
you make somebody-
everybody wants what they want when they want it.
Yeah, and it's always in retrospect. So you like to do like you're doing, run the water, run the sewer, run the roads, ask them to come. It's not only that you're more likely to fit in their time frame, but you're controlling the growth. which has got to be better than not controlling the growth. Because not controlling the growth could be really
It creates gross inefficiency.
Yeah,
And that adds to cost.
yeah,
And it's hard to have dialogues in public dialogues because most people are disengaged from community and the politics of this decision making. They only know there's a planning commission when somebody tries to put a hog farm next door to it.
yeah. Or they get their house off 2 feet or something.
Yeah. That's the only time they know there's a planning commission, and then they're just mad as heck at you. And they want their way. And, I'm being part of a society means that we all have to give and take. And ultimately, I'm an urban planner with an economic development planning emphasis. So my graduate work's in urban planning. And I believe, and I got involved in economic development to step back. I grew up 15 minutes from Look Rock Tower, Foothills Parkway. And so I had a bunch of buddies, we were all mountain boys, we all ran around in the woods. And so as we got into college and things and didn't have time to go play the way we wanted to, one of the things that we would do was we'd meet up on Look Rock Tower, the observation tower, to have a few cold beverages and kind of catch up. And we would spend our time looking off across Tennessee Valley. From Look Rock Tower, if you've never been there in Blount County, you can see the Cumberland Plateau. You can see all the way to Star Mountain and almost to Chattanooga. And so we would sit and look across that landscape. We could see Neyland Stadium when there was a football game going on up there in the lights. And we all started noticing how the light patterns were changing over the years. And it got me to thinking about, I love these mountains. I want to have this lifestyle. I've never thought about moving away from East Tennessee. This is heaven to me. And so I became concerned as an individual about what's driving this changing pattern I'm seeing, mostly with street lighting at night. And I got to thinking about, sitting up there, oftentimes alone, thinking about, is this good, bad? I don't know. That led me, after a few years in my uncle's outdoor advertising business, which wasn't satisfying work with me after my college degree, to start thinking, I'm going to go back to school and I'm going to figure this out. So I actually ended up in planning school because I was concerned about how East Tennessee, as slow as it was changing in the 80s, was changing. And ended up, after having a 3-hour interview with the dean of the graduate school of planning at UT Knoxville, being offered an internship. I basically went in going, what is planning and why should I do it? I think I want to help people, I want to help us develop properly. I want to know how you do that. But at the same time, most of my friends are having to leave because there aren't good jobs. So I began literally thinking at the age of 24, 25 years old, I want to do something that helps jobs be here, helps this region, my home, be economically viable, but also protective of the natural beauty and the resources that we have and we enjoy recreationally and the lifestyle. And it's my heritage. And I didn't want to see us lose our culture either. That's important to me. And I don't know that I've done well with that element. But at any rate, those combination of things are what led me ultimately to the profession that I'm in. And when I was working with Kimberly Clark, that was the first 100% recycling mill to be built by the paper industry in the United States. The first of its kind. The greenest paper mill in America was my first project.
You realize in 14 years, you've relocated Whirlpool. Vocker's come in. GE plant. Amazon. And now developed a new industrial park and got this new corporation.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
I wish I'd done better. I wish I'd done more. I'm not sure that our economy, our community could absorb anything at a faster rate, and that's the balance we always try to work on. I've been blessed. We've done, I think, 42 projects, most of them existing industry expansions since I've been here. And Lisa Pickle, my existing industry director, who does most of the day-to-day interface until they have a special project need, she works very hard to keep those folks happy. But, you know, the new companies are Amazon, GE, Vocker, Triumph Sheets, and Canon Automotive.
Where's Triumph Sheets?
They bought the old Midwest Vaco building, and that's a box manufacturer. So, and they're a corrugator, and they bought 357,000 square feet in 2019. And we're running billboards hiring people right now, so if you're looking for a job, call Triumph Sheets. Neat company. Robert Kraft is one of the owners of the company.
I bet a lot of people say, I didn't even know that.
Yeah. I think one of the big criticisms that I get politically is that I treat this like it's the work, it's what we're doing. And, you know, I don't necessarily go out on promotional tours when we land projects. I don't spend a lot, I don't want to wear people out.
You really don't,
do you? No. I mean, I'm a worker just like everybody else, and
I mean, you could really flaunt it, I believe, if you wanted to.
That's not, the community does this, not me.
Did you play Matchbox cars when you was growing up?
Yeah. Yeah, I had Hot Wheels.
Did you have little cities inside the...
Yeah, I had little train sets and all those kind of things. But I didn't really figure out urban planning and develop those interests until I was in my 20s.
Maybe you hadn't given it a name.
Yeah, probably. But my dad, well, being a military man and being structured, I lived in a structured world. I wore my hair a certain way. I had a list of chores that I did for my allowance. I had responsibilities from the time I was 13. And I've worked since I was 12, mowing lawns. And I've never not had a job. And I've watched my father and my mother, you know, they were working class folks. My mother was a high school graduate, and my dad has his GED. And I watched them make a lot of sacrifice. And we had a simple life. I grew up in a 900 to 1,200 square foot home. And
he's a member of that greatest generation, isn't he?
Yeah. He was a Korean War veteran, and he was a tough man.
Born just outside of the Depression, right?
Yeah, 32. He was in it. And
I bet he wouldn't go borrow a lot of money, would he?
No. My dad didn't borrow a lot of money, and my dad saved. My dad did not know what a vacation was, and my wife would probably say the same about me. I do like to go on vacations, but my career has been a priority, and I've not had good work-life balance. I'll be the first to admit that. But this is a consuming business. And,
I'll put my record up against yours.
Yeah. And you know, and I wish I'd done better, believe me, at all times. But I'm passionate about what I do, and I believe that what I'm doing is for the betterment of mankind in my community. And I don't try to put me up on a pedestal. That God called me and gave me some talents that I've been able to figure out that are beneficial to others. And it's my job to make sure that I go out and I use those talents where they are best served. And, you know, I stepped away from economic development for 6 years and was in private real estate development and enjoyed that, but it wasn't a passion. And of course, I'm a guy who started late enough to get going real good when 2008 came along and the Great Recession. And as you recall, every bank that had made you a loan suddenly wanted their money back.
Yeah, they didn't know your name.
Yeah, they didn't know your name and didn't understand why you couldn't write that $100 million worth of checks back to them, kind of stuff. And so that was a pretty...
It was worse than COVID.
Yeah.
By far.
Oh, I lost everything.
I say it was worse than COVID. I mean, I don't mean death-wise, but I mean, you know what I mean. It was bad.
I mean, it was... Our financial system almost closed. People don't know.
They don't realize
that banks stopped doing interbanking loans. That's the near fatal collapse of a financial system.
They will be teaching an economics class in 50 years, still trying to unravel 2008, 9, and 10.
Mm-hmm. But it was a great experience for me. Financially, it didn't pay off. It did all the way up until 2008. But I'm a person who had to look at a financial statement in August. I was updating for the banks and had a financial statement and looked pretty good. I'd been making $500,000, $600,000 a year in net worth gains off projects based on banking appraisals, not ours, the banks.
Well, based on the way you did it then, it was different then.
Yeah, and then First Bank shows up in August of 2008 and says, oh, by the way, that note that's due in February, we're not going to renew it. That was a $26 million note, or a $13 million note that had $26 million of value associated with it.
And you couldn't sell Coca-Cola then?
No. There was no place, they all looked at you and everybody looked at us and smiled and said, well, you just need to go find you another bank. And there were no other banks. And so I basically went from being $2.5 million to the good on a financial statement to $17 million in the hole in about 90 days. Just stepping back and taking a realistic look at it. And went 2 years without a paycheck. So I'm very thankful to this community because this community let me come back to the profession that obviously I was called to be a part of. I guess I would say I was meant to not be successful in private development at the scale I was at because I was meant to be here.
Well, don't you think a lot of that is musical chairs? Everybody's just going around and when the music stops, everybody tries to sit down. I mean, everybody's great. It's like everybody's a great fighter too. Everybody knows what to do until they get hit in the nose.
Yeah. And then you can't see because your eyes are watered.
Yeah, so it's not,
Yeah. Oh, I felt as though it was part of the evolution, and it's helped make me a better person. I've shared that story. I don't hide those things. I think people need to understand that I'm not perfect. I don't have necessarily the right answer every time I speak. I have an answer that's based off of my life experiences and my professional experiences, and I'm never trying to do anything but do what's in the best interest of Cleveland and Bradley County. And there may be a day where Cleveland and Bradley County looks at me and I look at them and we go, I can't represent you as best as you need to be represented. That day can come. I mean,
I can't imagine.
I hope it doesn't, but
I can't imagine that happening. I mean, if somebody, I can't imagine anybody being more passionate about it, and with this record.
Well, that's awful kind of
I mean,
you to say. I'm not the best that there's ever been.
I named 6 things that just I know.
Mm-hmm. And I'm proud of every one of those projects, but I didn't bring Vocker here. I've maintained them since they made a commitment here. So
well, same thing.
Don't confuse me as being the guy that recruited. Gary Farlow, who hired me, is the person who did the staff work to recruit them, and the whole industrial board, was actively engaged. That was a project that started in 2004.
But your business is, what you're in is almost like getting in a boat and going out and just trying to fish.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't control when you get a bite.
No.
You can
And
just fish, right?
I just fish.
You just try to have the right bait. You try to.
I try to build a product
Try
that's
to-
based off of what I'm seeing people asking.
Yeah.
And then tempered by the capacity or the willingness of the community to spend.
Yeah.
And everything I do takes money. And that's where the grind is politically. I'm the guy that's asking for the big dollars. And, you know, trust me, I know that the clerk and master's office is not happy if I'm up there trying to get them to give me $6 million to improve Spring Branch, and all they're trying to get is, you know, $100,000 for new equipment, and my decision costs them their 100. I understand that I'm the guy who carries the banner for the unique project opportunities for this community, and I'm having to compete internally at times, and that's very uncomfortable because all those people are the ones that do the things that make us the package that we are that I can sell.
It seems to me like that what you do is the key to our kids not moving away when they start working. Now put a price on that.
At its fundamental basic, that is what I'm trying to do. Create an economy that attracts your children so that they will stay. We used to talk a lot in Loudon. You know, Loudon is a similar community to Cleveland in that it's a ring around Knoxville. It abuts Knoxville. They're where 40 and 75 split, so they're in an even better competitive position, but they're half the population. But that community had the good fortune, before I got there in the early 80s, of recruiting the largest single investment in the state's history at the time. Tate and Lyle is their name now, but it was A.E. Staley. They're the large corn wet miller. Make high fructose corn syrup, which a lot of people are scared of now.
Yeah.
They also make ethanol that goes in their gasoline as a
Same place.
byproduct.
Oh, they don't get them mixed up.
No. Well, you know, alcohol is sugar that's taken to alcohol, and at some point in time in that pipe, I'm sure there's pure grain alcohol, but it ultimately gets poisoned and turned into ethanol. But when I went there, that's a community of 4,000, a town of 4,000 and a county of 38,000 that had landed what was the biggest industry in the history of the state for 4 days, and then the Nissan plant announced in Middle Tennessee in the 80s. But they use more corn to produce corn syrup and ethanol in Loudon, Tennessee than the entire state of Tennessee produces. And they're the largest. They and Olin are the two largest river traffickers on the Tennessee River system, bringing in corn and taking out the feed that is the byproduct of the corn wet milling process. And that community, when I went there, its entire economic development program had been shut down. That was such a strain on that small community, the stress of bringing in a mega industry, that
that's got its problems too, doesn't it?
Yeah, politics flipped, and they fired the economic development staff and stopped funding economic development. Got out of the business. And then they basically hired me, a young 27-year-old that was working half-time at the Tennessee Technology Foundation, finishing up my master's, which I never finished, by the way, and because of work. And the Technology Foundation had a lead with Eastman Kodak on a biotechnology project that was going to use feedstock from Staley as a raw material to start the process for their product. So it would have been a co-location beside the Staley plant. And my boss at the time, David Patterson, one of my best professional mentors in my life, basically called me into his office and said, "It's time for you to become an economic developer. And I'm going to assign you this project, and you're going to meet with the mayor, the head of facilities for Eastman Kodak, Eastman Chemical, and the mayor of Loudon on Saturday morning at 11 a.m. This was like on a Thursday evening. And that's how I started my economic development career. And we were unsuccessful in landing that project. I lost my first deal.
But you learned a lot from it.
But I learned a whole lot. And mostly blindly stumbling through and running back to the office and going, what do I do here, Dave? But that's really how that all started. But, Loudon was a can-do community because of that experience. And essentially, after we worked that project, apparently they were impressed enough with my performance that they called me in blind, unbeknownst to me, set up a job interview. And I was called one day by the property assessor and asked if I could meet him for lunch. And I said, sure. And he was a guy we'd drink a beer together and shoot the bull, become friends. So I'm sitting at the bar at noon, middle of the week. In comes Doyle Arp, and then the mayor of Loudon and the mayor of Lenore City and the Loudon County mayor. And I kind of pushed the beer away from the table and got up and walked over and sat down to lunch, and they interviewed me and hired me for the job.
They didn't see the beer, maybe.
They saw it, but they knew I could do. I guess they were desperate enough. They gave me a chance. And I stayed there for 10 years. So, yeah.
I think what you're doing, Doug, is a good thing, and I sure feel good next week that you're in Cleveland, Bradley County, and you're doing what you can to keep our kids from having to move out of town and work.
Yeah, that's really what it's about. I mean, I mentioned early on, one of my reasons for moving this way was all my friends moved away. When I grew up, my grandfather worked for the aluminum company. Alcoa dominated Maryville and Alcoa. When I graduated from Heritage High School in 1978, Alcoa had 12,000 employees in 3 plants.
That's more than we've got here.
Yeah. When I graduated from my senior year at Maryville College, I interned at Alcoa and worked in every division of that plant. And I actually saw the last roll of aluminum foil come off of a machine that had been operating since 1914. That's how old they were. Yeah. And I saw them making the disc, the aluminum disc that mainframe computer data was embedded on. I mean, they did everything. I saw them making aluminum siding. Today they make aluminum for car parts, and they make can stock. They don't make the cans, they make the
They've
bullets.
had to evolve, hadn't they?
Yeah, and they have less than 3,000 employees.
That could be scary.
Yeah, they've done a great job. Blount County's, done a great job. They've got Denso's replaced Alcoa as their largest
Some
employer.
people here work at Denso, don't they?
And there are people here that work at Denso in Athens. But
that's what,
Denso in Athens is probably here because Denso in Maryville's here.
Sure.
And by the way, my former boss, Gary Farlow, president and CEO of the chamber until he retired a couple years ago, he did the Denso project in Maryville. So this community's been blessed to have had economic developers that were planners. Gary was an urban planner too, went the same program I did, and a little ahead of me. But this community's been blessed. I know actually a third person who was an urban planner who worked here back in the 90s, Kristen Reese. She went to graduate school of planning.
I don't remember her. Who was before her?
I don't even know. Gene Stinson was the president of the chamber at the time. And now Gene's the head of the professional organization for it's the Southern Economic Development Council, SEDC. So this community's had some very good economic development professionals.
This is the best place in the world to live.
Oh, I think it's a great place. I mean, Maryville's home, and Townsend is where my blood
East Tennessee
originates
is the best
from. But
place.
East Tennessee is a wonderful place. This is home. I mean, I'm blessed to be able to drive an hour and a half and go see my dad and spend time with him.
That's worth a lot, isn't it?
Yeah. He put a weed eater in my hand yesterday, and I spent 4 hours weed eating. But other than that,
tell him you got arthritis.
Oh, he don't care. He goes, "That'll be good for you, son." But it's amazing. My dad was he gets out and he's running a mower yesterday at 88.
88 years old.
And he broke his back at 72.
Yeah.
So he's got titanium, and the lower 3 vertebrae were destroyed. And but he still gets out and mows, and he's got a garden. Well, he doesn't have a garden now because the groundhogs got all of his stuff.
What did he have?
Oh, he was growing okra. He put out okra and tomatoes and snap peas and all kinds of things.
Hey,
and the groundhogs, as soon as it all sprouted, they ate it.
Ate every bit of
So
it.
he's been trapping and killing groundhogs since then.
How do you keep them out of it? I don't know how to.
You got to kill them.
I guess you start a vertical. What do you call it?
Vertical agriculture.
How much
project.
land do they use? Have they been asking for?
The ones that I've worked on were looking for 100 to 200 acres.
Did you tell them we already had the Amish up here?
Mm-hmm. Oh, my wife and son wear it out.
My wife, I think she's got a boyfriend up there. She goes
Does
up
she
there.
make weekly trips?
Oh, daily. She goes every time. She's always coming back from there. That's all
okay.
I know.
Well, that's my wife goes over there at least once a week, I think.
I've been going to, and in the dead of winter, I built a building up there this past winter, and it was en route from one job to another job, actually. And I would go in there in the dead of winter, and the only thing you could buy was blankets, soap, and those corn husk things that you take a bath with.
Okay.
But I bought them anyway.
Yeah. Oh, it's wonderful. In those lifestyles, I couldn't live that way, so I'm very proud of those ties to culture and history.
I believe I could get there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a guy who's not afraid to go to the woods and stay for a long time. And my dad, I was raised to try to be self-sufficient and independent, and I've got a copy of Camping and Woodcraft by Horace Kephart, which is the definitive guide to survival.
Is that the guy? When did he write that?
1906. If you don't have it, everybody needs a copy. It tells you how to build a log cabin, how to forage for food, how to skin an animal.
Has his stuff stood the test of time?
Oh yeah.
What's the name of it?
Camping and Woodcraft by Horace Kephart.
Horace Kephart.
Yeah, and he was he was instrumental in the founding of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park.
Where was he from?
He was when he came to the Smokies, he had been the head librarian at the St. Louis Mercantile Library, which at the time I think was one of the largest library collections in the country.
How do you know so much about him and his book?
Because I've read it, and I'm a student of the history of the Great Smoky Mountains. It's a great book. It's a difficult read. It was all written in the turn of the century. But yeah. Horace, he had a drinking problem, by the way, and abandoned a wife and 4 children when he left St. Louis and came to the mountains. So
maybe they run him to the mountain. Run him to the mountain.
And I'm not going to vouch for that part of him, but he was a rider. He was an outdoor rider, and at the time, and was well known. And he moved into the Smokies. And the mountain people took him in and basically nursed his drunk butt back to health. And he became enamored with the mountain lifestyle. So he rationalizes moonshining for us quite well. And he actually died coming back. He was buried in Bryson City, and he came back from, he was coming back from a moonshine run, and apparently he and his cab driver had begun drinking, and they had a wreck, and it killed him. So he's buried in Bryson City.
Is that where he had the wreck?
Yeah. But he wrote a book called Our Southern Highlanders. University of Tennessee Press still publishes it intermittently. But and it was a book about little vignettes. Each chapter was a story about his experiences in what's now the Smoky Mountains, but it was the mountains of North Carolina and East Tennessee.
Isn't it funny that back then camping and woodworking went together, and now to me it doesn't even go together.
Yeah.
But woodworking was an integral part of camping then.
Yeah.
Now we put up a vinyl tent or something.
Yeah, nylon tent.
Nylon tent.
But he tells you how to make a shelter and an emergency shelter, how to build a log cabin.
All we know.
And camping and woodcraft. Now, Our Southern Highlanders is just a great, it's a book that I gave away to many companies that would move here because I think it reflects the origins of what we are as a mountain culture. And, you know, when you look, there's another book that I would encourage people to look up, and it's called Last Train to Elkmont, written by Vic Wheels, W-E-A-L-S. And he worked for the Knoxville Journal, I believe, and most of what that is a compilation of newspaper articles he did. But he chronicles the last days of the logging operations in what's now the Townsend area, and also the Elkmont area. So he's kind of.
Why did they stop logging there? Because of
the people bought it. You know, school children put their pennies from milk and things, and the people actually raised the money and bought the national park. And the Rockefellers, I think, are the family that made the last contribution to buy the last of it off the logging. But the logging companies had pretty much raped and pillaged the park. I mean, it was.
If they hadn't have made that a national park, it'd have subdivisions on it now, right?
Oh, it would just be a massive erosion gully. It would have been used to death.
That goes back to your planned progress.
Yeah. Hey, listen. We need to stop arguing whether or not climate change is real. Science is pretty definitive on it. And I'm married to a scientist who's an ecologist. And she was telling me about what to expect 25 years ago, and it's here today. So science is, scientists aren't politicians, and politicians need to quit making scientists politicians.
Yeah.
You do your politicking.
Stay in your lane.
Stay in your lane and quit undermining. Who on earth had ever questioned a guidance from the CDC before last year?
Nobody.
Nobody.
All of a sudden they start questioning.
Yeah. Well, it's because political leaders use it for a political tool.
They've got us questioning everything.
Yeah. Well,
some
are.
I'm even wondering if you're here.
Maybe, maybe not. But, we need to just kind of fundamentally sit down, our region needs to be protected ecologically. You don't need me to fill this county up with industry, and I'm not going to. That's not my intention. My intention is to do the best I can to bring logical industrial growth that is cutting edge and advancing us into a more sustainable future, because we have to think sustainably, and to do that in a way that improves the economic opportunity for our citizens, so that our citizens can have the option to stay here. That's fundamentally what I'm trying to do.
And that's what all those things are such noble things. And when you drive by the Chamber of Commerce and you get a cup of coffee at the Starbucks and you drive around that corner, people have no idea how important your job is, not for next week or in the next 5 years, but for 20 years from now.
Well, thank you. I hope so. That's why I do it. I'm not trying to exert my will, but let me put it to you this way. Communities need to develop their plans. They need to develop their long-range plans. They need to have strategic plans. They need to engage citizens in dialogue like the city did over the last couple of years about where do we go. We all need to be doing that continuously, and citizens need to be participating in it. And it isn't to go and have a fight. It's to have a discussion and a dialogue. We're all going to have different perspectives because of how we've come up in the world, and what you need to depend upon your politician and expect of your politician and the government staffs is to take all these 117,000 opinions and to find within those that center ground that moves us forward and doesn't alienate everyone or diminish what we want as a long-term goal, as a community. Right now, our community has some goals, but it's not ever really set down, particularly at a county level, and said, here's where we want to be in 20 years.
We've got to be somewhere.
Yeah.
Do you want
to wander around aimlessly, just seeing what happens? I mean, part of what we endure today is because we just let it happen.
That's right.
I know this community didn't adopt zoning until they were forced to by the state to keep state funding.
Zoning is not for anything other than to try to control the future of how things go.
Yeah, and to protect certain uses from other uses. Now, that's a big debate in planning, so I'm not going to say that, our community evolved naturally. And that's why we have the mix of housing and industries. And part of that in modern times, the mixture of housing gets adjacent to industries, is because that's where the infrastructure is to build at density. So there's always that push into there. But while it doesn't bother us apparently as a community, I've lost probably a dozen projects because the site I had that worked for them had a house next to it, and the business had a policy that they would not build a plant within so many feet of a home because they did not want to be a nuisance to the homeowner.
They probably experienced problems with that.
Or they didn't, or the homeowner becomes a nuisance to the business. And so we've actually lost opportunities because of that land use pattern we have. So over time, we need to try to correct those and you don't want to isolate things in the pod because that becomes inefficient use of utilities and roads and burning gas and all those things. So we've got to continue to work on, sidewalk systems for walking. We've got to continue to build greenways to interconnect rural and urban areas for interface.
And we want their corporate people to want to live here.
Yeah, and we want them to live here.
Or we want them to want to live here.
Yeah, and what that means, we have to have a diversity of housing options. Mm-hmm. One thing that you can have here that you can't have in California, or you can't have in the Northeast, that's land. And so we need to think about how much of this large lot, kind of like my dad has, 5-acre, 10-acre mini farms.
Mm-hmm. They're coming back in vogue, aren't they?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they are. And I would venture to say that most of the mini farms that you're seeing on the south end of the county are people that have been living in Chattanooga.
Probably.
Are professionals that have pretty good incomes. Mm-hmm. And they've gone, hey, I want to get a couple of horses. Why you would do that? My dad had horses, and all he ever did was work on his horses. Yeah. So he worked and he dealt with his horses. I never did figure that one out. But apparently if you love horses, you really love horses. But, there's a lot of that movement here. And I don't know that that's good movement per se, because a professional that makes their living it's their right, a person that's making their living being a lawyer or a doctor in Chattanooga isn't too interested in what's going on here, except don't get around my property.
That's all they're interested.
Leave me my little home, my little piece of heaven. And I think that's potentially a conflict point, but that's what planners are here to do, is to work that out. But we're going to have some increased regulation here, so that we don't hurt each other in trying to do what we all want. And I know that's a vague statement, but it's relevant to this community. And we need to, as a community, continuously work on evaluating the ways the city and the county can work together on things, because if they're pooling their resource, they're diluting the cost to the average citizen. And I think one of the worst things that I've seen over the last 12 years I've been here is a tension between city and county politicians that I don't understand the origins of, other than just basic rivalry. that I think have led to some poor decisions, and that may cost us more money in the long run. And that's concerning to me. And we need to have industrial land, but we need to have recreational spaces. Quality of life is more important to me to attract an industry today than it was 10 years ago, because suddenly labor's in short supply. And companies are beginning to look at a community as not as a place that has an inherent labor pool that they can go and consume, but their bottom line perspective is that no community has enough labor. So we're looking for communities that offer a high quality of life that people want to move to. So the fact that our housing stock is depleted, the fact that we don't have a diverse cost range of housing being developed in this community is probably having a greater impact on our ability to recruit an industry than at any other time in our history. So you builders need to be building workforce housing, which I know is difficult because it needs to be cost controlled.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important for the habitats of humanity and people to be here working. But we've got to figure out that housing, and that's where you mentioned the motels and the hotels that are on the end of their life cycle. Maybe they can be converted to apartments, and maybe not as many units as they were as a hotel, but we can.
Well, you can't get over all the building requirements, so that's not an option either.
Then they need to be demoed, and
Maybe
something else needs to be built there. I mean, I'm pretty quick to come to conclusion on those things.
It's tough. It's a never-ending thing. It's just something you got to think about daily. And I'm glad you're in that position and not me, because it would be hard.
There are a lot of people helping, and conversations I have with you out on the street influence what I do. The homeless guy that I walk down the street with after he comes to me and asks me for money, and we have a little conversation, that influences what I'm doing. I have to let all those things kind of flow in, and then my quiet evenings, I'm usually trying to sort what's happened during the day and figure out exactly, what does it mean? How can it help me do my job better for this community? How can it help me come closer to the perfect project? I've never done a perfect project.
You have a passion for this, and it comes out in the way you're talking.
Well, I hope so. I mean, it's my calling. I recognize that, and I've had a great career and great mentors. I've not worked a lot of jobs professionally here in this, but I started out in the high technology initiative while I was learning how to be an urban planner. How many people have had that chance? And I had my first mentor was David Patterson, an economist at TVA and a professor, and he had a PhD in economics. And then I had a Jeff Deerdorf, who unfortunately passed away on a mountain climb in Colorado this past year, but he had worked for TVA and was an urban planner, Penn State graduate, and he had a Joe Paterno stand-up usually in his office back in the day, and so we won't hold that against him. But he taught me a lot about economic development, and also I learned a lot about TVA, and that's one of the most least understood entities in Tennessee.
Isn't it funny how people have different passions, and you've got a passion for this?
Well, part of it's probably because I couldn't be a professional athlete because of my arthritis. So I had to use my brain.
Well, thanks to Bradley County. It's Bradley County's advantage that you've got arthritis and couldn't be an athlete.
Yeah.
I
always wanted to be a baseball or a basketball player. So
if you were, you'd be one of the best around.
I'd be retired now too, wouldn't I?
Hey, thanks for coming.
I appreciate it.